Welcome to our weekly Tuesday webinar. I'm Yomika Bennett, Executive Director of the New York Charter Schools Association. I'm joined today by Susie Carello, Executive Director of the SUNY Charter Schools Institute, David Frank, Executive Director of the Charter Schools Office at NYSIS, Aaron Cochran, Managing Director, Policy and Operations at New York City Department of Education, and Corey Callahan from the New York City Charter Center. Today we'll follow our usual format. I'll share updates from the association. We'll hear updates from David, Susie, and Aaron, then take questions from the Q&A before turning over to New York City DOE questions. Last week, we shared with you the news of the school dashboard that the governor launched to track and communicate COVID cases in schools. The link to the dashboard, we're going to put that in the chat. When we first shared this with you last week, there wasn't clarity about implications for charter schools, but we now know that charter schools are expected to report any positive cases in order for them to be included in the dashboard. You should have received an email on Monday to that effect as well. The DOH has issued guidelines that schools must report the number of persons known by the school to be COVID positive, number of tests taken, type of test, laboratory processing, test turnaround, and testing location nexus. This information must be delineated by staff, including teachers and students. Your school must report every instructional day no later than 3 p.m. This information should be submitted via the web portal with the link that we're dropping again in the chat. New York City has also launched the COVID Situation Room and has indicated that New York City schools, including charters, should contact the Situation Room directly to communicate any COVID cases or concerns. Charter school leaders of charter schools co-located in DOE space can contact the Situation Room via phone at 212-393-2780 or email at rts@buildings.nyc.gov. Private space or standalone DOE space, charter school leaders should call Department of Health and Mental Health via phone at 866-692. Should contact via phone, and we will drop the phone number into the chat. It's not clear how the New York City Situation Room and the New York State School COVID Report Card will work together. It's probably safe to say that participating in one will not absolve schools of the requirement to participate in the other, so plan to participate in both, depending on where you're located in the state. The Situation Room also may be very useful for schools to get and give information as required of the state and or keep abreast of what's happening locally and connect to resources. We also have an update on another topic discussed last week, namely English language learner identification and the timing of the New York State ITEL administration. At yesterday's Regents meeting, the Regents announced that for the 2021 school year, any parent of a student who attends a school which is operating fully remotely or have opted to have their child receive instruction fully remotely in accordance with the district's reopening plan, and whose child has been provisionally identified as an English language learner via remote identification, may submit a waiver of the administration of the English language proficiency identification assessment. If a parent submits such waiver, their child will remain provisionally identified as an English learner for the 2020-21 school year. Unless the school where the child attends changes to in-person or hybrid instruction during the school year, or the parent has opted no longer have their child receive instruction entirely remotely. If either situation occurs, the student must be administered the NICETEL within 10 days of such occurrence. That was a lot. If you have any questions, email us, call us, and we'll follow up. Also of note from yesterday's Board of Regents meetings, the Regents discussed the potential to cuts to education, indicating that without additional funding, the cuts may last well beyond the 2021 school year. We need the federal aid. That's no good to anyone who's on this call, who's been on our webinar since March. Whatever cuts may come can be averted with federal aid. I repeat that over and over again so that I can make the push again for Fund New York Schools, the initiative that we have to encourage urge Congress to send aid to the states. Again, we need this. So share that information, please, with your network, your family, friends, strangers in the line at the grocery store, anyone you come in contact with. Also, please use any of your social media to reach out and spread the word. Without the funding, schools are at risk to have their state aid cut. That will hurt our ability to educate our children well. It's important to note that while the cuts and the threats of cuts are out there, schools should be well prepared. Again, this information has been out. We've been talking about potential for cuts since March and April of this year. Be aware of what the actual cuts are versus some of the information that's out there about what may come, and choose wisely on your how do you respond to what you're receiving and what the cuts are. Again, that's a lot of information, but the bottom line to that is if you're thinking about any drastic measures in response to that, give us a call. We can talk through some of the things of what's fact versus what's fiction and what's happening with the state aid. September 22nd is National Voter Registration Day. The last day to register to vote is Friday, October 9th. Governor Cuomo announced last week that voters statewide can now request absentee ballots for the upcoming November 3rd election. A new online portal will handle the request, for the absentee ballots, which must be received no later than October 27th. Early voting in New York State will begin October 24th and run through November 1st. We recommend you share this information with your staff and families to help get out the vote. And finally, I am excited to announce registration for the New York Charter Schools annual conference is now open. The conference will be virtual, held online October 21st through 23rd. The theme for this year's virtual conference is Innovation and Empowerment. Special keynote speakers will include 8 Black Hands from their famous podcast. The conference is free to member schools, parent members of the New York Charter Schools Parent Council, and charter school alumni. Please visit the conference webpage to register and for more information, and we just update in the chat. All right, having said all of that, David, Susie, and Aaron, welcome. I'll turn it over to each of you to hear updates from you and your teams. We'll start with you, Susie, because you're first on my screen.
It's great to be first. It's lovely, another lovely Tuesday to connect with everyone. The Institute really has no requests for you this week and no updates for you this week unless you're up for renewal. And then Jeff's team has probably reached out a little bit regarding that. That's all I have to share right now.
Well, I can go. So we have a bunch of memos and guidance that came out this past week, and Yomika alluded to some of it, but we're very happy to report that the division of the budget approved the disbursement of almost $25 million in funding to charter schools. Unfortunately for our charter schools outside of New York City, this only applies to New York City charter schools that serve students in the 1920 school year. It'll be about, there's some rounding in there, but it'll be about $195.45 per student. And the State Education Department will be sending out that funding in the coming weeks. It'll take about 3 to 5 weeks for that funding to hit your accounts. As always, make sure that the account information that you have on file with the State Ed Department is accurate and up to date. This is the same account information where you would receive funding directly from us. So think title funds. So make sure that that is up to date. So that's a bit of great news. And we hope that those funds certainly help. We have a memo about that up on our website, and we sent it out through the Charter School Listserv, which is another reminder to ensure that you have up-to-date and accurate information on CEDREF, and this kind of information will get out to you. We also sent out a memo regarding a snow day pilot program, and this is not something that charter schools need to sign up for. It's a pilot that the State Education Department is doing, and schools will be selected. I don't think any charters are in the pilot, but eventually the State Ed Department is looking to is looking to replace snow days with remote instructional days. And that's one of
To ruin children's winters.
I
Sorry,
know,
that's
but you know that learning learning must go on. Whether there's rain or sleet or snow or hail.
Sledding and hot chocolate.
That's right. Well, you could have hot chocolate when you're doing remote instruction. We also sent out a memo regarding two things. One, there's a survey regarding instructional models, the instructional models that your schools are using. There was a memo that went out. It's a brief survey through the SED monitoring and vendor reporting system, also known as the portal. And so if you log into your portal account, you'll see that survey. In addition, there is a requirement that if your school has and this is pursuant to Education Law 215 and Commissioner's Regulation 155.17F, that if you're going from, if you're providing in-person instruction and your school needs to close in-person instruction and go to remote instruction, although no school should be closing, you're just reverting to solely remote instruction, then you need to report that through the SED monitoring and vendor support system, which is also known as the portal. That memo is up on our website and was also sent out via the charter school listserv. But if you're fully remote and you stay fully remote, there's no need to report anything. But if, for example, if you're providing some, whether it's a day a week or 5 days a week of in-person instruction, and you need to close because of, or revert to remote instruction only because of COVID, then you would need to report that through the SED monitoring system, also in the portal. We also sent out lots of memos, as I said. We also sent out some guidance on pupil transportation. And we just reiterated that each school district is required to provide, even if the district is only providing remote instruction, they still need to provide transportation to non-public and charter schools, especially for students who have busing on their IEP. And so we put that into writing, and that's from our interim commissioner, and that's also up on our website. And then I won't get into the reporting your COVID cases because Yumika spoke about that. And I also don't need to talk about the L identification piece because Yumika covered that as well. But if you do have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them, any questions, big or small. And if you missed any of the information, or you missed those emails and are really curious to read all the memos that we think pertain to charter schools, you can always do so by looking at our website. And I just posted the link in the chat. So with that, I'll turn it over to my DOE colleagues.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. One update from our authorizing side. We have updated the charter information portal for all of your accountability requirements for this school year. So take a look at that. Let us know if you have any questions or access issues. And your first deadline is October 1st. So looking forward to your submissions. That is our update.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Oh, actually, Yumika, I forgot to cover one thing. My apologies. Sure. Erin reminded me, but so that I just want to reiterate that Regents waiver information is so critically important. I know we spoke about this last time, but the Regents waiver data is due on the 18th in New York City, as the DOE has let you know. If you're outside of New York City, contact your regional information center, and they will be able to let you know what the deadline is. But make sure that you especially for our high schools, that you report the Regents waiver information so that your students get credit for the Regents waivers, and that there won't be any problems with them graduating, particularly if they're moving on to a new school or leave your charter school. Not reporting that Regents waiver information could potentially be the difference between them graduating on time or not. So please, anyone on this call, just double check that you've reported that. We really appreciate it.
All right, great. Thank you. Before we turn it over to the Q&A, we have a few questions received in advance. We'll start with the first one. It's for you, David. During the webinar we hosted last Thursday about the upcoming deadline for the 2D compliance, a few questions came up about existing agreements that different BOCES have established with groups like Google, et cetera, and whether there's a way to access those the language or the agreements, or have them be applicable to charter schools.
Yeah, so it actually is applicable to charter schools. However, you must go through your level 1 center. So you upstate, they call them the RICs. So your RIC might be the Winnie RIC in Western New York, or for here in Albany, our RIC is called NARIC, the Northeast Regional Information Center. In Westchester, it's the Lower Hudson RIC. New York City is its own RIC. It is not Eastern Suffolk BOCES. Eastern Suffolk BOCES is not your RIC, it's New York City. Eastern Suffolk BOCES contracts with New York City to provide some services. But I did speak with Winnie RIC about this, and they said that it's a term of their agreement with Google. They're required to service their catchment area. They can't go outside of that area. So, so unfortunately, if you're not in Western New York, if you're in New York City, you can't partner with the Winnie RIC, but talk to New York City, or we're on a call here with charter school support organizations. You might want to talk to them about reaching out to Google and seeing what kind of bulk service agreement you can procure. But that's all it is. The RICs have a bulk service agreement. Contact your regional information center.
And if I could just follow up on that, because I don't want folks who are on Thursday's webinar to feel like they're chasing their tails or they're getting a game of telephone here, because we have talked to Google and schools have talked to Google, and Google doesn't see the relationship between the agreements that they have brokered with some of these BOCES, and I think the agreements are with the BOCES and not the RICs. So schools who are listening, we're happy to reach out to the relevant RICs and see if they have agreements that could be extended to schools. And I think, David, you're right, from what we've heard from Google, that has to be done through the BOCES or the RIC. But I think the global question, just for your awareness, is that the agreements are clearly out there. And so from a 2D compliance perspective, it should be, sort of relatively, well, in theory, it should be relatively straightforward for them to be, for the dots to be connected. And right now the dots are not being connected because, groups like Google neither understand nor care about the dots being connected. And I think the point of intersection that we're happy to follow up on is with the BOCES and the RICs, because I think so far there hasn't been a lot, and I don't think it's a lack of willingness. I think it's a lack of understanding. But I'll follow through.
Yeah, and I wasn't on the Thursday call, but I did hear that my name was invoked, so I looked into this, and I did call and speak to Winnie RIC. The BOCES are actually the RICs are a creature of the BOCES, so I'm sure that it's, Google doesn't know the complexities, but each RIC has what's called a JMT, a joint management team, that's composed of all the BOCES, and the BOCES then feed up into the RICs, and so there's a relationship there, and then there's a relationship between then there are non-RIC BOCES, and it's complex, but the best thing to do is reach out to, if you're in New York City, reach out to New York City. If you're or reach out to the BOCES or Rick in your area.
And David, if I can just add, we have had some schools reach out to New York City. Our IT department is looking into it because the current state of our agreements are not shareable as they are. So we are looking into this because we recognize it as a need.
And just to reiterate, Eastern Suffolk BOCES is not the RIC or the BOCES for New York City. New York City doesn't have BOCES. Eastern Suffolk BOCES just has a contract with New York City to do some work. So there's only one charter school that's in Eastern Suffolk BOCES catchment area. That's Riverhead Charter School, which is a great charter school. Check out the work they're doing. And Ray Ankrum, who is the leader of that school, is actually one of the 5 hands that's going to be keynoting the State Association conference. So check out the work that they're doing in Riverhead.
Excellent. Thank you. This next question is for both Susie and David. We've been receiving questions from potential new school applicants wondering if any of the current, context will have implications for the RFP process, which would normally kick off earlier in the next calendar year. At this point, what are your expectations for the timing and parameters of a next RFP cycle for each of your organizations?
We're currently in an RFP process now for new schools, and that is our primary focus. And so we're going to wait until we finish this RFP round before we make any before we turn our attention to next year's RFP. But I can't imagine that much would change from our 2020 to 2021 RFP. I think we have a ongoing commitment to receiving applications from applicant groups that are proposing to meet the requirements of our priority school design. And these are schools that are serving the most at-risk students across the state. So think overage undercredited models, models that are serving students with low incidence disabilities, schools that are serving a particularly high risk, or have a key design element to serve a particularly high risk group, such as students who are McKinney-Vento eligible, or students who are in the juvenile justice system. All that information can be found in our RFP on our website. But I think it's a little too early to tell what will transpire in 2021. It's we have a big election between now and then, if you haven't realized, and we also have a serious financial burden across the state. That doesn't, however, ameliorate the acute educational need that still persists, again, particularly for our most vulnerable students.
So we anticipate having, as with every year, the RFP out for comment, public comment that's required sometime towards the end of the year. Usually that gets posted for us in December. And then the final RFP posted sometime in January, once we get the public comment back and make any changes to the RFP that are pertinent based on the final, to feed into the final RFP. Right now, we are planning on similar cycles to what happened prior to 2020, which is one earlier in the year, in 2021. And then we have in the past, said, we'll have a second round, and we may have to announce those dates at another time. We anticipate there will be some content question changes based on what everyone is learning about remote instruction and how that may change the face of what charters are able to do going forward. So it's likely that the structure of the RFP is going to be quite similar, but there may be embedded in that structure some additional questions about preparing and planning for opportunities that everything you all are teaching us about remote instruction or blended instruction might make possible in the future. So as I said, generally our timeframes are around the same. We're planning on 2 rounds. We know that we weren't able to execute on that this year, but we are hopeful that in 2021, there will be a new normal that we can respond to.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's the end of our questions that were received in advance. We'll turn it over now to you, Anna, for the Q&A.
Thanks. And I'll just say, Susie, I'm still holding out hope for the old normal. Maybe I'm I'm gonna live in that fantasy for as long as I can. All right. So David, I see there's a question here in the Q&A that you flagged that you wanted to address in response to a question about immunizations, which I think may be in follow-up to some communication that you sent out either earlier this week or last week about immunization. So Donna asks, our school is currently 100% remote. How are we going to tell parents that their child cannot attend school unless they receive those missing immunizations, given that they are remote? So where attending means, being on video.
So this is guidance that's from the New York State Department of Health, and it goes back to 2019, so it's pre-pandemic. And keep in mind, COVID it's a terrible illness. There are, so many people have died. However, there is a serious public health risk if students are contracting and spreading diseases such as measles that are far more contagious than COVID. So there is a public health risk and obligation to maintain vaccination, even if students are engaged in remote instruction. Why? Because students presumably are going to leave their homes at some point to go to the grocery store, to play outside. And so there's a public health risk and obligation. All students to participate in any education program are required to comply with the immunization laws, and students are not permitted, and again, this is not state ed, this is Department of Health, students are not permitted to participate in any aspect of your educational program once they're in the exclusion period. That means that you cannot send work home. You cannot have them participate in remote instruction. You cannot have a teacher call them up to engage in tutoring for them. And I know that sounds harsh, and that sounds, schools have pushed back on that, but it's in the interest of the public health. And so if you'd like to take that up with the Department of Health, you certainly can. But those are the rules and those are the requirements, and it's agnostic as to whether the student is remote or not remote. And I hope that you understand that students are, even if they're engaged in remote instruction, they're not living in a bubble. And there are, unfortunately, far worse diseases that exist than that we have immunizations for. And hopefully, in the short term, we'll have an immunization for COVID-19, and that will be included on the list. So I'm just passing that information along from the New York State Department of Health.
Donna, I would only add my personal opinion when I was a school leader is that this felt to some degree really uncomfortable that schools were made the method of enforcing what are, I personally agree, legitimate public health priorities, but that the sort of granting or retracting of access to school was the hammer that the state chose to use in order to enforce these things. But it is in many ways the best and in some cases the only right point of intersection, in the same way that schools are being used as the lever right now to ensure that all students have access to food. So if we can be helpful in any way to your school or to anyone else who's struggling with this in terms of crafting messaging or materials or anything like that, we're happy to do it. But you know, I know from being in that position that it feels very awkward, and in particular right now where what you're saying is like you can't be on, you know, video, or you can't receive these materials or things like that. But it is, you know, ultimately one of the only levers that the state has to pull in order to achieve a goal that I think right now is probably more visibly necessary than ever. And with any luck, it will drive more kids to get flu shots. So that would be, you know, my other hope and silver
Yeah,
lining.
and the flu shot is not one of those required vaccinations.
No, I know it's not required, but as long as you're there,
right,
shot.
And then just like, you know, just like I'm passing the buck over to the Department of Health, you certainly can do the same and refer to Department of Health guidance. But it does put schools in a very awkward position. But unfortunately, it is for the greater good. So. If you don't mind, because I mistyped in one of the questions I typed, I typed in the Q&A. Scott Quintero from Flax asked a question about ESSER money, and I mistakenly said charters aren't eligible. I meant charters aren't eligible for year funds, not ESSER money. They are eligible for ESSER. And a memo was sent out about a lawsuit and a potential recalculation of ESSER funds, as well as GEAR funds, which are for district schools only. That does not apply to charter schools. So it has to do with funding that districts are required to share, ESSER and GEAR money that districts are required to share with non-public schools, and charter schools are not beholden to that. So the memo that went out about that lawsuit is not applicable to charter schools. So Scott, sorry about any confusion. You can still call me if you want.
But just to recap, David, so if folks are sort of just tuning in or you know, sort of weren't fully dialed in, charter schools had until the end of August to submit applications for ESSER funds. I don't know how these acronyms are intended to be pronounced at this point. And so if a school submitted their application by August 30th, they should just be waiting. They shouldn't be concerned. And if a school did not submit their application by August 30th, too bad, so sad. And that is the status of ESSER funds for the purpose of charter schools. Accurate?
Accurate, yes. Spot on.
Great, thanks. All right, I'm going to put Yomika on the spot to answer our next question, but please, David, Susie, Erin, if you have thoughts or input. So John's question about, are we currently operating on a de facto 20% budget cut to our per pupil funding this year?
Short answer, no, not necessarily. Remember that the charter tuition payment is a formula set in law. So that amount is set in law. There's been no changes to that formula. And in fact, there have been no broad-based across-the-board cut to the actual state aid that goes to school districts in terms of large portions of foundation aid. So for two reasons, no, you should not be operating under that right now. And I will limit my response to that because that's I think the quickest, most succinct answer to that question.
David, Susie, Erin, additional thoughts, guidance, recommendations, pots of money?
No extra pots of money. So again, I will defer to Yomika and others in thinking about what the future may hold. One of the reasons that Barb Achenauer and the Mighty Mighty Institute finance team has been talking with our schools about some pretty conservative budgeting this year is because we don't know what any final determination about the budget will be. It's an unprecedented year budget-wise as well. We know that there are likely to be state deficits. What that will look like for charters, I do not have in a crystal ball. And so we are hopeful that the budgetary process that you all engaged in over the summer has provided you some comfort to weather what is currently a set of unknowns about what the total charter funding will be till the end of the year. And I will put in a pitch again that if you are concerned or there are worries, please reach out to us, because there is no better finance group than the Institutes. Sorry, I'm a little biased, than the Institutes, and we're happy to help think through what some possibilities might be.
I would just add that it behooves schools to think of, to have a rainy day budget and to think through how they would proceed if they did have their budget cut by 15 to 20%. Schools shouldn't be caught unaware that if that does happen, if charter tuition is cut, which is a big if, but we don't know. So if it is, that schools aren't left scrambling saying, oh no, what do we do now? This is the first time we've thought of this. Schools should be thinking now. They should have been thinking through the summer, what would we need to do in order to weather that storm? And there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and we've spoken about this before, but things like purchasing, going out to bid when you haven't in the past, looking at expenses that maybe are a nice to have but not a must have, consulting fees and costs, things like that, all deserve a look before schools start cutting programming. I think it'll be a pretty hard pill to swallow in any event, but having to cut programs should be the last step that schools take, and it's a eye-opening exercise to go through. So we encourage that all schools do so.
Erin, anything to add?
No, nothing to add. I think Susie and David spoke to it very well.
Great. I have one last technical question for David about the NICETEL, and then hand it over to our friends in New York City. So these waivers that can be filed, where do they get spent?
That's a good question. Further guidance is forthcoming.
Great. We'll make a note to include that as an update next week. I will also say, for folks who've been following any questions in the Q&A, a question was asked about, if you are fully remote, do you need to be reporting to this daily portal? And my understanding was no, but someone else who's engaged with the portal says that it asks for information about fully remote students. So I will add that to the list to confirm and clarify. And New York City, over to you. The whole city. We'll start on Monday.
Thanks, Anna. Hey, Erin, how are you?
I'm all right, Corey. How are you?
Good. All right, folks. So we've got a lot of questions here. We got a lot in advance. I see some in the chat as well that are duplicative, so we'll try and get through them all. I just want to start it off at the top because, we are always getting questions about the expedited testing and the Learning Bridges program. And unfortunately, there are no updates. I heard from Anjali and Erin earlier today. There's no updates right now. This is something that we're trying to advocate for on all different facets, and we'll obviously keep everyone posted as soon as there's more information, but just wanted to put that out there. Also, I know that most of you are used to us having Fridays at 1 p.m. session with the Department of Health. We ended up canceling last minute last Friday because the State Department of Health sent you all an email at 11 a.m. letting you know they wanted you on a call at 1 p.m. And we know that people needed to get on that so they could learn how to use the dashboard. If you somehow missed that, I've already put it in one of the answers, and maybe Vicki, you could transfer it over to the chat. But if folks missed that webinar on Friday, the Department of Health has posted that, the State Department of Health, let me be clear, has posted that webinar, so schools that missed it are able to get that information. With that, we will try and have a session, I think, this Friday. I know that DOE is still trying to confirm schedules with their folks and Department of Health. Thank you, Vicki. So that's where we're at. So we'll get started. Erin, any details you can share on the DOE's extended use policy and when charters can expect it to be released?
Yes, so you will receive more information later today. The guidance at a high level is that before 7 a.m. or after 3 p.m., you will have to submit a permit for use of your space. But the good news is that if your instructional program for all of your students goes beyond 3 p.m., then we can give you an exception for that permit, but not beyond 6 p.m. So there's some good news there. And we'll be sharing more. We're planning to send an addendum today, so we will share more information there.
Got it. The DOE Situation Room. I got a couple questions about if I missed the training, how can I access information? Because I know there was a training held yesterday at 2. But Erin, I'm going to actually have you back up and just, if you would, explain a little bit about what the DOE Situation Room is and what you guys are looking for. And then obviously if you could give information on the trainings available.
Sure. So the New York City Situation Room is a space that is going to be physically staffed. So if you're thinking about a situation room from the movies, kind of similar to that. Actual people in a room, DOE folks in one spot, Department of Health folks in another spot, taking calls. If you have some kind of case that you are looking at or evaluating, or a staff member has shown you some kind of results in your DOE co-located space, then you would pull together your building response team, and then you would also be calling into this helpline. And we know that an email address was shared in a lot of the publications. We really want the first step to be that phone call, because there's going to be a conversation. And I think I want to really make sure that this isn't like a reporting situation, like, oh, we have a case, hang up the phone. This is, we think we have a case, let's have a conversation so that we know what the next steps are. And it's really, there's going to be a DOE or other New York City agency call taker there to receive the call. But Department of Health is going to be reviewing the situation. They may be able to pull up a result before you're able to get it from someone, or before you're able to independently verify a result. So it really is the start of a conversation and a process. And from there would be next steps. So what information is going out, who's getting what, all of that. And then if you're calling in and there's some kind of outstanding question, you will get a call back to close the loop to say we're still looking into it. So I just want to really frame it less. It's not about like reporting a case and then hanging up the phone. It really is a conversation and a process to really help make sure that the health of your staff and students is maintained in your building.
Got it. Thank you. So on that note, I think, could you speak a little bit about, I think the training yesterday was geared really to charters in co-located space. So what is going to happen with charters in private space?
Yes, so we are continuing to work on that. In the meantime, charter schools in private or standalone space should continue to reach out to the DOHMH hotline. And I just want to share that all charter schools, but again, this is specifically geared to charter schools in co-located space. We're going to be sharing out the PowerPoint from the call on Monday, but we're also going to be holding an FAQ session tomorrow from 3 to 4:30, and we're going to be sharing out that information today.
Got it. So if you missed the meeting yesterday, this is what you should look for instead of joining another one. Right?
Correct.
Got it. And I am seeing a question already, is that the Situation Room, I guess, is asking for a DOE employee ID number. Is there a number that charter should provide instead?
Yeah, sorry. So just as in any new thing, we are constantly pushing and finding out all of the little nooks and crannies of situations that need to be addressed. So you do not need to provide any Teach ID. Anjali and I are continuing to work with the Situation Room folks just to confirm what information is needed, but you don't need to provide that. Just so you know, folks answering the phone, just so you know that. And then if you're asked for that, just say I'm reporting a charter staff person, and so we don't have that, and that is okay.
Got it. I know that part of the training on this also talked about the forms that would be sent out to families. Is there a way that charters can just access these forms? I think these are the form letters, just so everyone knows, these are the form letters that DOE and DOH have been drafting together on how to notify your school if there is a positive case, if there's exposure. Schools are looking for those those forms so that they could use them, particularly those schools in private space who aren't going to have as quick of access to the Situation Room.
So we have made this request to share out these letters, and so we will share in a future C-Weekly.
Got it. And this is following up on something from 2 weeks ago now, which seems like a lifetime, but not that long. Are charters able, I know you've asked for schools that were interested in partaking in the randomized testing program with the UFT DOE. Is that something that charters are able to be a part of?
We're still looking into that.
Okay. Can charters in co-located space use their own health screening tool after September 21st for students and staff? As schools might remember, if you're in co-located space, the DOE has asked that for these 2 weeks before students return, staff is using the DOE screening tool in the mornings.
That's correct. And yes, starting September 21st, students and staff, you can use your own screening tool as long as it meets the minimum of the DOE screening policy.
Where will schools find information about where students can pick up school food starting on September 21st?
Students learning remotely may pick up at all district sites during the school operating hours starting September 21st. So they're a nearby district site if that is most convenient.
Got it. So there's no all the pre-registration stuff, that's all done, or that's not
correct. Yes, because of the extension of the waiver, correct. No pre-registration required.
Got it.
For the fall.
I got a bunch of questions about busing, and then this afternoon I got a bunch of follow-up questions because I think some busing information was released to schools. So I think the first question I was gonna have you answer is, are bus routes starting on September 21? And I think a lot of schools have been hearing back that they are. And then the follow-up question is that some of the schools are being told that their bus route schedules are being based on the times the school was in operation in the 1920 school year. And understandably, a bunch of schools have made changes to their start and end times. And how can they get that changed in the system?
Yes, so we are working on sharing in this update, hopefully to go out today. But yes, the plan is that bus routes will begin on September 21st. So in the update that we share, just a small tangent, in the update we share, we know many of you are not in person on September 21st or even in September or October. So a very urgent request that we are going to send you is to update your calendar with OPT, and we'll be sharing information on how to do that because in that system is how you will notify OPT that you do not need a bus dropping off at your school on September 21st. So just heads up on that urgent ask coming. But yes, that is the plan, that bus routes will be running on September 21st. In terms of the session times, yes, the routes are based on the 2019-2020 session times. We understand that schools have made some changes to their days. And so we are in conversations with OPT on what the process will look like to adjust those session times. And we will have more to come there, but know that it may be later into the fall when that is possible. So if you have any specific concerns, definitely reach out to charter schools at schools.nyc.gov, and we can continue a conversation.
Got it. So I will just reinforce that because I definitely have heard from a few schools that are very concerned about this because start times have shifted and they've been planning one way. So here, I think what Erin is saying, like, please reach out immediately if you're a school in that situation and need to let them know exactly what your timing, your bus route timing needs to shift.
Yes, just to manage, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, just to manage expectations, we are continuing to look into the process for updating the session times. So we definitely want to hear from you if you are facing particular challenges given the current routing. But we just want to manage expectations that you won't have adjusted session times in September. Just managing expectations.
Okay. And then just a clarification, the busing routing information has gone out for private space charters as well as co-located charters, right?
Yes, the ridership reports are live. So the normal place that you would go to look at your ridership reports, that is now live. My understanding is that, and so that you know, OPT is not sending routing information home to families. So the ridership reports have been adjusted to allow for easier information sharing by your teams to families.
And I'm seeing a question about, can you clarify if there's any difference between the general ed and special ed busing routes that schools would see in that?
So there's one file for special education and one file for general ed.
So, but both general ed and special ed busing are starting on September 21st.
Correct. And I would just say, if you are not seeing something that you are expecting to see, number one, check that you have students moved into the correct OPT code, and that if you have a site move, that you have moved that OPT code to your new site, because we're still hearing that there have been some lags in schools taking action in ATS to move students into correct OPT codes, class codes. So check all of that information, make sure your ATS is all squared away, and definitely reach out to your transportation liaison to troubleshoot.
Great. So anything else on buses? I noticed that you collect a couple questions, answer live, but I think you've said a lot about buses, so we can move on if you have, if you're finished.
I think I hit everything.
Okay, cool. And obviously folks can populate if you have more questions, right, on buses. So switching topics, can charter schools in NYC DOE space, I'm reading into this question, expect hand sanitizer stations in each classroom?
So I need to get confirmation on this about what the expectations were, so we'll get back to you.
Okay, and I would just add that I think, Erin, this is something that is usually covered in office hours tomorrow morning with facilities. Yes. So that would be a good place. If you don't hear back from Erin, I would go to that at 11 a.m. tomorrow, right, Erin?
Yep, that's at 11 a.m. tomorrow.
Okay, and I will
Excellent slide for it.
Sure, but I will also just say my understanding is that it is not going to be necessarily in every single classroom if you're a charter school in a co-located space, but I've definitely heard reports from charters that have had hand sanitizer stations put up in each of their individual classrooms. So I think there has been an inconsistency in how it's actually come out, but I do believe that the last I heard on this was that it was not, schools should not expect that every DOE classroom was getting hand sanitizer.
And just to add, oh yeah, sorry, Corey.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add for charter schools that have had the hand sanitizing stations installed, those charter schools will be responsible for restocking the hand sanitizing stations when the initial stock runs out. So just wanting to make sure everyone's on the same page there.
Got it. And then I see another question about the extended use permit, costs and hours. And Erin, I think we already said it, but just in case the folks missed it, all of that you think is going to be released later today or tomorrow in C Weekly?
Yes. Yes.
Someone is asking a DOH question, so I'll ask it, but we might have to defer to Friday, Ashley, just so you know. At what point is a charter school in private space is recommended to close because of positive cases? Meaning if it's one person who was tested positive after being on site or two people. I think the school was trying to get this answer from the DOH hotline. I don't know, Erin, if you want to take a stab, I can as well.
So I don't want to weigh in on what the DOH would be sharing in this particular instance, but I would say if you have an urgent issue and you are feeling that the DOH hotline is not giving you the answer you need, please email us, charterschools@schools.nyc.gov, so we can support, look into it, be aware of your issue. But yeah, I don't want to weigh in on the what the DOH would say, so I want to find out from them.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the chat the DOH FAQ that they released a few weeks ago for charter schools and private space, because they have an answer to this question. And the answer basically reads that Their recommendation is that if you have 2 or more confirmed cases, you are encouraged to follow the protocol of NYC DOE, which I believe is to close. So again, this can be something we've discussed further with Department of Health at our next call, but that is what we saw in their guidance that they put out several weeks ago. I see a question about joining the tomorrow meeting if we are in a shared space. I think that might be in reference to the facilities call, unless there's another call, Erin, that's happening tomorrow.
So it could be the facilities call, which would just be for DOE spaces. I mean, I think folks in private space are welcome to join, but it's very germane to DOE spaces. And then the other call that is happening tomorrow is the Q&A follow-up about the situation room. And so that is for all charter schools. It's definitely going to be most relevant for charter schools in DOE space, but we would encourage all charter schools to listen just so that you're in the loop on what's happening.
I know you just answered the question about charter schools are able to use their own screening tool after the 21st for students and staff, but a question has come up, can charters use the DOE screening tool beyond 9/21?
So that's a really good question. For students, for the student screener, more to come. For the staff screener is a piece of paper. So I think it could be as minimal as a piece of paper, it could be the online tool. I think one of the outstanding questions is that we don't know if you want back-end access to that data, we don't know that we would be able to get you that information. So if that is something important to you, you probably want to go your own route, but the DOE screener is also available on paper and you're more than welcome to do that. So more to come on those 2 pieces, and we're looking into that.
Got it. A question about if you were approved to have, you got approval for some of the streets to be closed for instructional use. A school is saying they were approved, but they don't know when the hours will be or when we can begin closing the street. Does the school need, and then I'll stop there and I'll let you answer that and then I'll go to the next question. It got more complicated as I read it. Did I lose you, Erin? I did. Oh no, Jen, lucky for you, you're still on.
Hello?
Hi, yeah, we lost Erin. Oh, there she is, she's coming back.
I'm here.
Hey,
Well,
sorry, I got booted.
Nope, totally fair. So Erin or Jen, I was putting Jen on the spot, Erin, but either of you, if a school has gotten approval to close streets for instructional use, what are the hours that they can close those streets, and when can they actually begin closing the street?
So I would have to look into that. Jen, do you know more?
I'm sorry, I do not.
Okay. And then the follow-up question also is the school responsible for the actual signage that you put up to say, I assume the street is being closed for instructional use?
Fabulous questions. We will look into this.
Great. And then a question about bus time, just to add this to the list, Erin, you might not know it, but if schools are receiving that their bus pickup time from last year is actually later than 3, how does that work with if students are supposed to be gone by 3? And I think by that it means if the extended use policy coming out says students are supposed to be gone by 3.
So the extended use policy has a waiver for instructional time. So if you have instructional time lasting beyond 3, you do not need to apply for a permit as long as it does not exceed 6. Beyond that, definitely please email charterschools@schools.nyc.gov and we can navigate your particular situation.
Got it. And I know we're over, but I did just want to ask Ira's question, and I'm not sure, I think this is about the DOE situation room. To whom do we send the number of students and staff who are tested daily? Unless it was a question for the State Department of Health dashboard. So
yeah, that would be the state question because we don't collect that in the situation room.
Got it. So I don't know. David, I know, has dropped off, so I'm not sure if other folks know the answer to that. And I guess not. So we'll have to get back to you on that. With that, I will pass it over to you, Yomika, for our closing.
Yomika actually had to get on a call with the DOH, so she texted me, and I am going to be Yomika and say thank you for that extra 3 minutes. And as a gift to you, you should find in your inbox an invitation to our virtual conference in October, which was sent out at the stroke of 5 o'clock. So please take a look. We'd love to have you participate. And if you have suggestions or requests for content, certainly let us know. We'll look forward to seeing you on Thursday this week when our deep dive webinar is about insurance, which is always a scintillating topic, but never more so than now. And then we tracked those questions to follow up with next Tuesday. But as always, if there's anything we can do in the meantime, don't hesitate to be in touch. So thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.